Hi, this is Emily Lytle-Painter, and I am coming to you today with the Tangled Web, which is a session hosted by the Media Production Special Interest Group for the Museum Computer Network. And we are going to be talking about organizing and storing your media files. So I'm hoping that a lot of people are joining us today online. We have some great speakers lined up. And we're also going to be taking some of your questions, which you can enter through the Q&A plugin through Google Hangouts. So I'm going to introduce our speakers real quick, and then we'll get started right with the first one. So we have Heidi Quicksilver from the Jewish Museum of New York. We have second will be Crystal Sanchez from Smithsonian Institution. And then we'll go into a Q&A about their presentation. Then we have Patrick Heilman from Dia Art Foundation, and Chiaretta-Lavatelli from the MCA Chicago, who's going to be, they're both going to be talking about case studies at their own institutions, and we'll be doing a Q&A after their panels as well. So without any further ado, let's get started with Heidi.
Hello. I today am going to do a very quick overview for you of very basic file management strategies, I guess. And Emily, watch my time for me. So the title of my talk is Hiding Causes Hoarding. The number one thing that I find with all of the museums that I've worked with, which is more than a handful at this point, is that when the more you share and the more people can see what you have available, the better off you're going to be. It's going to save your institution money on storage. It's going to cause a lot less issue for when people need to find something, so it'll save you time ultimately, because you'll have less people calling you and asking you about where to find something whenever they need it. So very quickly, my top 7 asset management tips, very basic for using a date format for possibly your file naming or your folder naming. Use a 4-digit year, 2-digit month, and 2-digit date. It very easily and quickly organizes anything that you want to keep on a server. Again, I guess I should clarify that what I'm speaking to today is file management outside of an asset management system. This is not geared towards the organization of files inside an asset management system. However, they could work simultaneously. So to standardize your terminology, make sure that in your institution you don't have 3 things that mean the same thing. The main place that I usually see this is for, say, the name of an exhibition or something. Maybe internally you have one name, maybe there's an official name for it, maybe there's a quick nickname for it, but no matter what, when you're going to name your files, make sure everybody's always using the exact same name to cover the exact same thing. 3, always put a strong description when creating your libraries and lists. Again, that makes your archive or your storage area a lot more user-friendly. If you're using a very simple, strong descriptor for, say, department, or if that's how you want to break down your organization, just make sure that you use a strong descriptor word. 4, if you insist on using subfolders, never number them, never label them something simple like JPEG, which goes along to always use a strong descriptor. And never go more than 1 level deep if at all possible. The farther you go down in subfolders, the more subjective and personal the organization becomes, as opposed to being something that anybody would be able to go in and find and locate. 5, use metadata, and I'm going to go into that more strongly in a minute. And 6, use versioning on important dynamic assets. If you know that you're going to have people updating things, make sure that you use some sort of version control so that you know which is the latest version for everyone to use, so that if something needs to go out, they won't use a version of the document or the image or the video that was made 3 weeks ago, that it's the most up-to-date one. And 7, the big one, don't manage by exception, manage by the rule. There's always going to be exceptions to every rule that you make, but you need to build your servers and your organization on the rules that cover the majority and work through the exceptions as they come along. So my number 1, as I had said earlier, is learn to share. The one thing that is going to help pretty much any organization that I've ever talked to is if you centralize access to your popular files. I think we all probably have the same experience where each department in your organization probably has their own files, and nobody knows who has what, and when somebody does share something with somebody, that person is never going to delete it because they don't know if they'll ever find it again. So when you have an obvious set of popular files that everybody's looking for all the time, create a good decent sized derivative set, maybe 3,000 pixel JPEGs if they're images, etc., and put them in a location and tell everybody where that location is. Which leads to number 2 here, educate your staff and your coworkers about A, where to find files and how to find files, what they can use the files for and how they can use it, which is a lot about permissions, and who to ask for permission or access if they're unsure. So sometimes they may find a file but they're not sure if they can use it. Educate people to make sure that they absolutely know who to ask if they're unsure before they grab something and just put it into a brochure or a publication or something that goes out the door when you're not sure if they should be using those files to begin with. On that note as well, utilize simple permissions for your file access. Whoever is in charge of your servers, usually an IT staff, if you have multiple, or if there's at least an IT person in your organization that can help you organize and set permissions on your servers. Any files that you make available, you can make into read-only, so that, as I said, educate your staff. As long as they can find the files and see that they're there, maybe they can't take them out, but if they want to use them, they at least know who to ask if those images are available for the particular use that they have. And you're going to have power users versus the majority of staff. So maybe some users need access to everything and they can take it because they know what they can use and what they can't. But even if you have read-only access for most of your staff, at least they know where to look. At least they can browse through what you have. And then they know who to request the images from or the videos from if they need to or want to use it for something. And last, eliminate duplication. The more access people have to the assets that you have, the less likely they're going to be to copy them and save them somewhere else. So if they can find them easily, if they can find them a second time if they go back, and if they know that it's always going to be in the same place and that they'll be able to locate something or browse through something, they're not going to steal it and make another copy and take up extra space on your server, which takes up extra time and extra money for your organization. So do everything that you possibly can to eliminate duplication. Next, in the files that you make available, or in all of the files that you have, your biggest ally is your embedded metadata. And I'm going to speak mainly just to digital images at the moment, but if you are familiar with embedded metadata, the more you use it, the more searchable your assets become. Number one, don't try to cram everything into your file name. There's no reason that your file names have to be fully descriptive. They could be a long string of numbers, and that should be perfectly fine if you have all of the data that you need inside your digital assets. And again, educate your staff about what metadata is, where to find it, and what exactly it is saying about each asset. The number one reason for all of this is because metadata is searchable. Through a basic search, just a Command F search on a Mac, or through an Adobe Bridge search and through many other programs, you are actually able, if you embed keywords into your assets, to search under that information. It does not require special software or Bridge.
Heidi, can you hear me?
Opened in Bridge that the first keyword is the accession number. The second keyword is primary, because this is the primary image in the series. And then a little bit of descriptive information that can help make this asset searchable. So no matter where I save this asset on the shared server, if somebody goes in and searches under any of these keywords, whether they're doing it through a Bridge search or whether they're doing it through a Command F search, I guess on a Mac, you do automatically, you can set it to automatically search the keywords, which is the little window I have on the right. If you open up any screen, yeah.
So we're at time.
Okay.
If you want to, okay.
Yep. Let me just quickly, again, back to, I'll wrap up quickly here. So if you do a quick Command F and you can go through the drop-down menu, you can actually pick all of the different types of information inside your assets that makes it searchable. So you don't need special software in order to gather all of this, in order to search all of this information that does not necessarily belong in the file name. And I guess to wrap up, basic file naming rules. I added this in just so that I can post this slide presentation and you can go back to it later. I'm not a very big fan of cramming information into your file names, like I said, but these are just basic things to try to remember about ways to organize your file names. And I guess that's about it.
Great. Well, thank you. So now we're going to go straight to Crystal, and Crystal is going to talk about video and file management.
Okay, great. Thank you for having me. Let me pull up my PDF here. Here we go, archiving media. That's my terrible Hulu slide when it went all glitchy on me. But so I'm Crystal, and I work at the Smithsonian. I'm a trained media archivist, so film, video, and digital and audio preservation. Excuse me. And I work in a central IT department here at the Smithsonian on the digital asset management team, primarily with audio and video. But today I wanted to talk a little bit about both sort of classes of content that a museum encounters and the different challenges presented by them through a sort of archival lens. I have a very archivist mind, and that's how I think of things. So the challenges that are presented in archiving large amounts of content. And then a little bit on the technical challenges specific to audio and video and tools that we found are useful in addressing some of those challenges. First, the Smithsonian Institution, very briefly, and then I won't talk about it again, but it is a giant place. So when I talk about challenges or we look at collections, we really have to look at each one on its own. The Anacostia Community Museum is not the zoo, but everybody has digital content, everybody has video and audio, and the technical challenges are similar in taking care of content over the long term and accessing content in the short term. But the sort of context of the collection is different. The challenges and the strategies that we employ are different. We find that there are different kinds of digital assets. So this says audio and video, but could include images also. We've sort of broken down things into files that are actually the collection, that are interviews, that are shot HD files, that are files that are preserved and the tapes were not retained, or they were, or digital surrogates, which we have a lot of, high-res images of, say, vases in collections. So splitting out those classes of content make it easier for us to make decisions about sort of the challenges that they present, the preservation actions, how often we do integrity checks, how often assets are looked at for obsolescence and things like that, to make it manageable for us. We also have, in terms of video and audio, you'll have museums that will retain raw footage for productions and edited works. Some people will just retain the final productions. We have recorded web streams. I'm sure that you find that you will have both produced content and content that is acquired, either in the archives or in the collection itself. And you have less control over, say, what you acquire and what kind of files you have. So there are different challenges there. So when we look at challenges in terms of my archivist perspective, I look at these things. Selection, what do we have? That's really the hardest part that we don't talk about as often. It's like, what do you keep? What do you want to keep? What's manageable? What is important? Do I keep all 1,000 of these files from this raw production or not? Source formats, what kind of condition are either the tapes, the analog materials in, or the files? What are the files? How do I know what the files are, and how do I assess risk to those files? Do I have a lot of AVCHD, that's MTS files that are just terrible archiving material because nobody else can open them? Original order, do I have to retain the folder structure of the files? Organization, how do I need to package lots of content together to make sure that I can find it, that it's all linked together? And this could be rights information too, release statements, things like that. Metadata, as Heidi was talking about, we're not as fortunate in the video community to have really good standards for video, embedded video, but there are standards for audio. You can kind of make up your own for video in the interim. You can have non-embedded metadata, and how do you keep that, and where is it located? How can you make it consistent? Use. This relates to rights. How will they be used now and in the future? This relates back to selection. You don't want to keep a lot of stuff that will never be used, and you do want to promote use of the content. Resources and timeline are really important. Who will do the work, and when will you archive? Is it right after the production? Is it Do you have a timeline for when you archive, or so that things don't get backed up? And then, of course, preservation. Do I need to migrate this material? Is the wrapper okay? Can I open this content? Are the bits all intact? How often do I check that? So the Library of Congress has a really good sort of levels of digital preservation. You can start at level 1 and move up. It's a really nice sort of grid here that we can distribute. It doesn't take into account organizational structure like funding and people to do the work, but it's really helpful breakdown. OAIS is an archival sort of model that a lot of digital archives are now embracing, and they talk about archival packages. So you have object information, different files for preservation format, dissemination format, and then collections management information like acquisition documents, source code if you're acquiring, complex objects. And then I like JoCam's model of the life cycle of a work, because this also helps you target different times in the life cycle of a file and risks to it. So very briefly at the end here, just talking a little bit about technical challenges to audio and video files, things that we encounter if we get a hard drive of content. What is on the hard drive? How do I identify the files, the technical information in the files? Some really good tools out there, Media Info and EXIF tool. Verification of files to make sure that that MPEG is an MPEG-2. ProKnob and Droid are great. If you're digitizing, QC Tools is a new tool to look at the signal of a video and make sure you don't have a lot of digital artifacts that you're introducing. Interstitial and DV Analyzer are for audio transfers. And then integrity of your files. Fixie is a great tool to help you schedule integrity checks and report out on them, so you can sort of automate a lot of this. Bagot is for transfer. And then for metadata, BWF MetaEdit is great embedded metadata for WAV files. And then MDQC is good quality control embedded metadata tool. And then transcoding, ClipWrap will help you, rewrap all of your MTS files without messing with the internal video stream. So tools like that, FFmpeg is a free tool that's really great also. I think that's me. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Crystal, very much. So we have a couple of minutes to get to some questions, and I'm hoping that Heidi and Crystal can maybe answer this jointly. So my first question that I had was an issue of the way that you were talking about subfolders, Heidi. And can you talk a little bit more about that? To me, it seems antithetical to not have subfolders to access information. Like, why wouldn't we use subfolders?
You can use subfolders, but if at all possible, limit them, I guess is what I'm trying to say, is that for the most part, the farther down you go in a file structure like that, the more complicated and the more personal that type of organization gets, because it doesn't necessarily end up being done in the same format for every single file. They also often end up with unnecessary folder levels. For example, if you have a main folder and then you immediately open it up and you have a subfolder called JPEG, and then all of your images are in there or something like that. Like, take all of your images out and put them in the main folder. If you have derivatives, it might make sense to create one level of subfolders. However, once you have subfolder within subfolder within subfolder, like I said, the organization of that becomes more subjective as opposed to structured. So it's better to limit the level of subfolders that you have as much. And if you're going to have the subfolders, make sure, again, like I said, that they they're names, or that they're you need a very strong delineator for what the difference is about what's contained in the main folder.
Crystal, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I would agree with Heidi. You want your strategy to be as user-friendly as possible, so that turnover isn't an issue, right? If there's turnover in staff, people can understand the structure and find things. With audio and video, it's a little more difficult because you often get packages of content that you need to retain the folder structure. So just being really consistent and knowing what the folder structure looks like and what you're retaining, and being consistent in your strategy is really important.
That's great. And we had a question come in from Tamsin, and I'm just going to read it out to you guys. It says, naming conventions. We used an accession-based number naming convention that includes shoot date and sequence. However, some of the numbers are delineated by periods. How do you suggest we easily rename thousands of files?
I have a pretty quick answer for that. I mean, there's a lot of different file naming tools that you can use, where you can select, find everything that's a dot and make it an underscore, where you can select a folder or select a set of folders or select even an entire server and make that happen. You'll have to go back and probably fix a few things, like if you take every single period out, it's going to take .tiff and make that into underscore tiff as well. But that's something that you could go back through a second round and say find everything that says underscore tiff and make it .tiff, so that you can clean up all of the tags on the ends of files as well, because the only place that you should ever have a period is right in front of the file type at the end of the file name. So you can, Apple has a good renamer that you can set up through Automator. There's a renamer in Bridge. There's an old one that I used to use called a Better File Renamer that I just downloaded from the internet. But there's a lot of different types of file renamers out there that will let you do it in bulk. Does that help?
I use batch rename utility, and it's pretty, batch rename utility is pretty robust. You can give it algorithms to do things and not do things.
Mm-hmm. And automated.
And I know the Adobe products let you sort of automate this on the import as new productions come in, so you don't have to build a new step in. You can build it into your process of preparing the files while you're doing your metadata.
Oh, Emily, you're muted.
Yes, I was. Sorry. Crystal, I had another question about the DOCAM chart that you showed.
Sure.
Can you explain a little bit more how you would use that with regards to file management?
Like organizing files?
Yeah.
So often I find that different departments in a museum actually retain full control to their content. We have a centralized DAM system that allows for that, and sort of storing everything together. You could create I don't think that the DOCAM model is a really good structure for organizing files. I think that it's too granular, like having a folder for exhibitions and one for conservation, and and trying to actually link the files together for one piece or one exhibition. I think you would find that you would have a lot of duplicates. So it's a good model for thinking about how content is created and how content might move through the life cycle and the risks to it at those time periods. But I don't really think that it's a good model for file storage. Like having different departments retain control of all their own specific content, I think creates a lot of duplication and actually hides content from each other. So does that make sense? Emily, oh.
Still muted, sorry.
Yeah, okay.
I'm trying to click on too many things. So does Anna or Patrick, do you have any questions before we get started with you guys?
I think I'll have a lot of questions for Crystal offline because she's got a lot of the information that I really want.
Well, there you go. If you have any that you want to ask in public, that would be fantastic. So Patrick, I'm going to pass the ball to you, and then we'll go straight from you to Anna.
Okay. My name's Patrick Heilman. I'm the Digital Media Director at Dia Art Foundation. I'm one of 3.5 people that straddle IT, digital media, and AV. And I wanted to talk today about our workflow from the point of shooting Born Digital to where we are now, where we want to go, some key hardware, software, and services along the way, challenges, and what and how we're learning. So I'm going to switch over to screen share here. Okay, so I'm going to try to get through this quickly so that there's time for questions and ideas, etc. at the end of this all. In 2007, we went to a Born Digital model that's mini DV, and actually just before that it was DAT and mini disc, but solid state audio recorders along with our video. The capture process, of course, back then is slow, it's real time, and it's prone to errors which further compound that. In terms of dealing with our files, it was about renaming things in a controlled naming format, which we kind of keep going through today since we're not working with a DAMS yet, or we're starting to implement. But so it's very important that our files are named in a way that live on and mean something, but it's pretty concise. Replication through backup HDs. We have an Xserve that's pretty crusty by now, but that hosted RAIDs, and data CDs and DVDs are thankfully retired, but that was a thing then for access. And video was edited rarely or just by request, and a lot of it was just pushed into the future because I didn't have time. So it's been something that I've done myself for a long time, and then finally get some help, which we'll see along the way. 2011, we go tapeless, which is great. ABC HD cams for us, Canons, which we're really happy about, and PreSonus hardware and software with a Mac for audio. 2012 was notable for us in gaining some more human resources. We have a full-time IT AV staff member in Chelsea who took on and got a remarkable amount of the backlog of video done, which has been great. And then data replication and offsite backups. SneakerNet, that was me on a Metro North train going back and forth between Beacon and Chelsea as part of my regular week. And that's still a great way to get massive data to and from if you happen to be in somewhat close proximity to an offsite storage location. 2013, we added a part-time IT AV assistant in Beacon, which has been huge for me to have somebody local because we cover a lot of territory. It's not just the video production and digital media that we're doing. We also have exhibitions. So having somebody on site there saved me a lot of time. And adding storage NAS units between Chelsea and Beacon has been big for us, and always buying more hard drives. 2014 has been about establishing a better digital media archive facility space in Beacon. It's a place that has a ton of space, but it gets eaten up by a lot of art nicely. And finding an environmentally controlled area for our stuff, our archive in the future, has been something that we've chipped away at and made some good progress this year. Adding another NAS unit for our data, because we're creating a lot of it, has been important in Chelsea. And then just kind of transitioned into network sync for our media using BitTorrent sync. So it's not just SneakerNet now. 2015, I'm looking forward to our Piction Dam system being better integrated. We're on that path right now, but that's probably a whole nother talk. Archives, the rough state of them, it's all being consolidated to Beacon, which again is for the environmental control that we have there, even though it takes it away from our administrative offices in New York City. The next thing I'm interested in checking out is cloud storage, something that meets best practices and DSA standards. So I'll be looking into that and having conversations with anybody who will talk. And tech along the way, I would say the key hardware for us has been bare hard drives, storage in tape cases. Synology NAS units have been very helpful for us. We're really excited about those. Key software has been a lot of the Apple stuff. We rely on Final Cut and Compressor and Handbrake for encoding. We're doing all this without a DAMs, and I think that's probably a key point to all of this. Even though we will be going to a DAM system, I still envision that handoff being about access media to the DAMs. It's not about how we're tracking all of this, all of the other issues with digital preservation, and that's a next kind of thing. Key infrastructure, more bandwidth has been huge. So we've gone from the T1 world to fiber, and I'm so thankful to our IT director for getting us there and suffering all the phone calls and Time Warner and Verizon type admin that's required to do that. Admin in terms of file naming, I'm breaking Heidi's heart and rules by trying to cram things into titles, but trying to keep it super tight. And that's just the way we had to do it to, I mean, it made sense to me, and I guess the challenge is making it make sense to more people as hopefully we grow in the size of, in the number of resources that we can devote to this, to archives and to digital media. Google Spreadsheet is how we manage the media status, and that allows us to collaborate between the few of us that are involved in this. Disk catalogs by Disk Catalog Maker to be able to see what's on physical drives when we're not connected to them. And I'm just going to jump down to challenges. I think the biggest challenge is going from a system designed by me, for me, to something that needs to be shared and is allowing much more progress, but it has to make sense to others, and then to the broader context of everybody else out there, and when we make our media public, that it fits in a smart way. We have no embedded metadata, so that's probably a blessing in some way and a curse mostly. That's a blessing in that we get to do our metadata right once in the future, and I don't know exactly how we're going to do that, but I'm working on it. We have no archives department, and yet we want to behave like we do. We care very much about the media that we have and the art that we have, and adopting best practices, and so we're trying to do all of that, and it feels like we're playing a huge game of catch up, but I'm really excited about the generosity of the community that I've found. Many important people within this group here. So it's been really nice. I'm really thankful and grateful, and that's it for me.
Great, thank you, Patrick. Also, I love the nested presentation style. That's awesome. So I'm going to hand it over to Anna. And then we'll go straight from Anna's presentation into a Q&A. We have about 20 minutes left.
Okay. Hello. I am going to give a little bit of a case study at my new organization. I started at the MCA Chicago about 4 months ago, and so up until now it's really been assessing what we have, what needs to get done, where we're at. I'm pretty sure the file naming rules page of Heidi's presentation was the opposite of how the video production documents were stored. It was like 1_ exports, 2_ assets, and so it's kind of nice to be reassured that my process of reorganizing everything is well-founded. Thank you, Heidi. Sharing that slide. So I am going to switch over to screen share mode. Let's see. Okay. Is that working? Yay. Okay, so I'm going to go full screen so I can't see any of you. So the first step for me was to sort of assess what we had, all the different hard drives, and create a patchwork setup, which is what we have right now. I threw this together in Lucidchart to sort of demonstrate the lack of lines between things. The line between the editor Mac Pro computer and my editing iMac, they don't have an iMac thing in Lucidchart, but the connection is really just through our network, and so it's very slow. Yes?
It's only showing the first page of your presentation.
Oh, it's not showing the next page?
Right.
How about now?
Yep.
Thank you.
Good.
Okay, I'll just have the ugly edges to the window. So the line between the editor computer and my iMac is just through the network, and so it's a very slow connection, and we just use it for pushing backups to have redundancy between both systems. And so I made these really fantastic little icons for old stuff and stuff we're working on now. And the idea is to get as much duplication as possible. Right now, this is backed up on a server in the IT department and has been pushed to our cloud backup. But this is the one with all the really ugly file structure that I am still in the process of trying to figure out how to tackle. On top of that, there's another drive like this that exists that's before the person who was before me. The person before that person was editing on Avid. The person before me was editing on Final Cut, and I have arrived, and we're editing on Adobe Premiere. So there's a lot of work to be done to get all the MTS files to not be MTS files anymore. Thank you, Crystal. Very, very, very excited about adjusting our workflow to incorporate that tool. And then what we do for contractors and interns is we just have portable drives that are duplicates. And so file naming has been our only version control. So it's become really critical for us to have a good file naming procedure, which includes the year, month, day method of implementing that with the exhibition keyword, and then version number and initials so that we know whose version it is. The version number always goes up, the initials change depending on who is working on it. You'll see over here in this very unconnected neighborhood, there's our archive digitization. We have a really fantastic Mellon Fellow and curator, Michelle Petz, who's taken upon herself to digitize a massive archive of tapes of all different types. And our hope is to get these all connected. And so this is the short-term solution that we're putting together, wherein we can all be pushing our content, both archives, and the W now represents just productions. And so archives and productions on one big NAS, This is obviously a short-term solution because it's only 13 terabytes. Our dream is to get a digital asset management server, and as well as a sort of everything files server. The digital asset management is tricky with video production because we have a lot of different stages of files. There's the finished product, and then what we've implemented into our workflow since I arrived is the creation of what I call rough raw files, because nobody in the museum besides us wants to deal with the raw footage outside of, you know, an archivist maybe looking for someone wiping their nose. But what we do is we take anything that's usable from the footage and create a new cut. So we cut out everything that's garbage, because there's a ton of garbage, and get to the good stuff, the good takes, and we call that our rough raw. And that's what gets transcribed and we use to make our scripts. However, nobody sees the rough raw, and we want to incorporate rough raw as part of our digital asset management system so that staff in other departments like education or development can know all the amazing stuff we have hidden away. And so trying to create a workflow that is functional for both the video production team but also for general access. And eventually, hopefully, public access. I think that a lot of this stuff is really meaty, and there's a ton of footage from things that hasn't been used for anything. And we also know that what we're making now is the archive of the future. And so a really key step in drawing all these lines together is not the actual files, but the spreadsheets, because we don't have a digital asset management system. And we in the video production department don't use any kind of cataloging system like they have in the library. We both maintain spreadsheets. So as Michelle is digitizing, she has a spreadsheet. And then as we produce content, we have a raw footage spreadsheet. And then we have a secondary spreadsheet that is a duplicate of the same fields that is finished produced video. What's been key is ensuring that all of those fields are the same across all the spreadsheets. And so we finally have just started sharing each other's spreadsheets with one another, and are hoping that we can create a system that functions for all parties. So it might have a ton of fields, but something that when we do have a digital asset management system, nothing is going to be more work later down the line in terms of metadata because we've been tracking everything wrong. And so trying to create a collective glossary and a collective set of fields to use. I'm trying to keep it short, so I'm done.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. We are pretty close to time, but we have time for a couple of questions. So does anybody want to, I didn't have any questions come in, but any questions from Heidi or Crystal for Patrick or Anna, or the other way around?
I have a question. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to make a super quick point that all of the spreadsheets, if you are considering ever moving into a DAM system, spreadsheets equal metadata, and they can all be imported into a DAM system into exactly the same type of labeled metadata fields, so that even if you're doing them now in the hopes of maybe implementing a system later, I don't think I've encountered any types of DAM systems where you can't change that into a CSV file and import it, so that you don't have to feel like you would have to copy and paste all of that information later. Spreadsheets definitely equal metadata.
Absolutely, and that's exactly why we're trying to make sure all of our spreadsheets are using the same glossary and fields, so that when we import it all, it's consistent across all the stuff.
Yeah, Excel is great. You can make your own Excel vocabulary drop downs, and yeah.
I love Excel so much.
Live in it. Yeah.
And Patrick, you had a question?
No, well, this is just spreadsheets in general. I felt kind of bad for using a spreadsheet to do so much work, and it sounds like it just kind of luckily is well accepted. So, yay.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Spreadsheets equal metadata for lots and lots of things. If they're consistent, also obviously that helps as far as columns or rows, so that at least they can match up to specific types of data fields within a system later on. That's going to only help you out.
Yeah, and we've even done things like take a tool like BWF MetaEdit and export CSV from it, so we have the template, and send that to the vendor to fill out, and then you get the spreadsheet back, import it back, and embed. It's like trying to automate as much as possible. Just having the right fields and the right order.
Sure. I did have one question come in for Anna, which is, Dawn asks, you mentioned your dams, is it represented in your graphic?
Not yet. That was the short-term solution because we haven't even selected a software or put together our grant proposal. So that's I included my long-term vision for the project, even though I hadn't intended to. But I want to note that we are planning to go that direction. It's just that we don't have all the knowledge we need to know in selecting what our platform's going to be.
Can I? So Anna, I saw in your diagram that your 13 terabyte space, you had separated out archives from production. Is that an actual separation? Do you have like policies for productions and then there's a moment where they are ready for archiving? I think it's a really interesting moment where productions turn very digital, that the archives and the production team get very close and are often the same people.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting because I don't know what the future holds. Right now, the separation is in that the archives are based in the library, and archives and library are very separate. I meant to mention that something that's really different about this position from any other digital media work I've done is that I'm embedded in the publishing department. And so my department consists of designers, editors, and our fearless leader is the Chief Content Officer, Susan Chun. And so we are not, we're sort of independent in this strange way. But I do see that, I would like to see there be a blurrier line between the two.
Well, I think also making the line actually there is important, you know, like having a line.
Yeah.
When we talk to people about like they're ready for archiving or they need backups or they want to use the dams at Smithsonian, I usually ask them like, well, when are you going to need to use this content? Like tomorrow, like, or in 3 years, you know? Do we need to save the Final Cut Pro project? Like, are you going to re-edit soon? Like, are you going to try to open up a Final Cut 7 project in 10? You know, like these risks that we talk about, and then make decisions on like, do you migrate content? Do you, what are the pieces that you retain? So I think the line is actually really kind of important, even if it's really close to the production.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's something that we need to, I mean, that there will be tons of meetings to figure out where what lives and how we distinguish different, because there's also within production, there's this idea that there might be rough raw footage, produced content, and then there's probably going to be some fuzzy things in between. We already have several productions that are like produced specifically for social media, so they kind of look like raw footage. And so I've been doing Venn diagrams to sort of figure out what the relationship is of all this content to understand how to best organize myself.
I'd like to also add that there is a kind of a gray line, as you just said, but archive does not necessarily mean like you're putting it away and nobody's going to use it again. To me, I use the separation of working files and I guess archive to mean finished files. So if you, once something's not being worked on anymore, there's no reason that you can't put it somewhere for access plus safekeeping plus in a specific structure on a server or in an asset management system or something. I don't see archive as meaning I'm not going to access it again for the next 3 years. I see it as meaning this is finished and it's no longer a working file. So I can see why you would want, sometimes just even having a separation between the two allows you more processing power for your working files because you're not going to need that power for your archive necessarily, so you can split up the server in that sense for more power over here or whatever. But I see the difference mainly, like I said, as working files are things that aren't finished yet, and the archive is something that is complete, and then you give people access to, not necessarily the raw data that went into the working file that may also live in the archive, but they'll be able to see and use whatever is in there that is considered finished.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Crystal, I'm sorry. We're almost at time. So I want to get to one more question really quick. I'm sorry to cut you off there. So the last one is, Alice asked, can one of you recommend where to find the best easy reference for best keywords for metadata?
I think that there's a handful of them. However, it's going to entirely depend on your organization, and building your own strong set of keywords is probably going to be the most useful to you. There are controlled vocabularies that you can choose from like the Getty or from the Library of Congress or from a handful of other places. However, depending, I don't know who the question is coming from necessarily, but depending on the type of cultural institution that you are, if you are a cultural institution, I guess, it is really going to help define what types of keywords you need. They need to be descriptive, and they need to be specific to your organization, whether it's people's names at an event, or whether it's the name of an exhibition, or whether it's descriptive keywords about the content of the digital asset that you're trying to provide more information about. Does that help? Anyone else?
Crystal, do you have anything, or Anna, anything to add to that?
That's a really good answer. There's also like technical keywords.
Yeah.
Like EASA has a good one for audio and video. Just being consistent, and you can find good controlled vocabularies and then building your own. I think it's really important.
So it is 11:59 West Coast time, so I think we're going to wrap it up. But as far as I remember, everybody posted their contact information in their presentation. So please feel free to reach out to all of us if you have more questions or you want to get into more details with any of the speakers. And we look forward to seeing you in Dallas in November for the conference, so that we can talk about this more in person. So many thanks guys, and everybody have a lovely day. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.